book off my bookshelf is County Folklore, Leicestershire and Rutland, collected and edited by Charles James Bilson, issued by the Folklore Society. Now this is a book of extracts and it's printed, and it's number 3, and it's printed in 1895, but it refers to a lot of texts that are a lot earlier, which I will endeavour to find those books somewhere. But for now, get yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy today's episode. Welcome to this episode. This one's Tree and Plant Superstitions. Copt oak, a trysting tree of the olden time, stands on the high ground to the west of Ulverscroft. On the spot it may have been under this tree, Eric the forester is said to have hanged his forces against the Norman invaders. It was long a place of assembly on matters connected with a forest, or perhaps a court. Copt oak. On an eminence not far distant from the high hills of Bardon, and nearly in the centre of Charnwood Forest, is the county of Leicester. Grows an aged oak called the Copt oak, which from several extraordinary circumstances may be believed to have been an object held sacred to the British Druids, and to have really been a Celtic idol called a tax. Such idols were formed, as above stated, by cutting away the branches of a gigantic oak and affixing a beam, forming a cross with the bare trunk. The epithet copt or copt may be derived from the Celtic cop, a head, and evidently indicated that the tree had been handed and reduced to the state of a bare trunk. That it was gigantic when entered in evident from an actual measurement in its present state. The remains of the trunk, which is 20 feet high, the height proper for the tax, show that the circumference at the ground was, or rather is, for by boring the earth an accurate measurement has been made, 24 feet at the height of 10 feet and girth is 20, giving a diameter of near 7 foot, or more than 2 yards. If the tree ever formed a Celtic toe, it must be more than 2,000 years old. The present state suggests that the idea of this is very possible. The vast tree is now reduced to a metre shell between 2 and 3 inches only in thickness, being about 2/3 of the original circumference, perforated by several openings and alive only in about 1/4 of the shell, bearing small branches, but such as could not have been grown when the tree was entire. Then it must have had branches of a size not less than an oak of an ordinary dimensions. This is evident from one of the openings of the upper part of the shell of the trunk, exactly such as a decayed branch would produce. These remains stand just within the bounding walls of the area or consecrated yard of the chapel newly built, and called the Copt oak Chapel. There is no surrounding wall or fence, nor are there any appearances of such an enclosure. It is very probable that the first consecrated it in surrounded by an open glade in a grove, which constituted a Celtic temple. Such grove has, however, been felled, yet the Copt oak has been spared, but it stands in the vicinity of a wood, once part of the supposed grove, and not 100 yards distance. The ancient and long-continued celebrity of the Copt oak accords with the opinion of its former sacredness. It was, before the enclosure, as writes an animated and accurate potter, the historian of the forest of Charnwood, one of the 3 places at which swan motes were held, always in the open air, for the regulation of rights and claims on the forest, and persons have been known even in late times to attend such notes. The active-minded historian, above named observers, at this spot, it may be under this tree, Edric the forester is said to have harangued his forces against the Norman invasion, and here too is the parliamentary troubles of 1642. The Earl of Stamford assembled and trained bands of the district. These facts mark the Copt oak extraordinarily, and show, notwithstanding the lapse of 2,000 years, the trunk was at this distant period a sacred structure, a Celtic idol, and that is an illustrative of antiquarian records. From Dudley's. The 3 courts of the Forest of Charnwood met in the open air. that of the lordship of Whitwick near Sharpley Rocks, and the place where it stood to be traced. It is called the Swanmote Rock, and below it was a spot bearing the name of Lady Aspin's Pool, a legend of which is printed in Potter's History and Antiquities of Charnwood Forest. The court of the lordship of Groby and met at Coptoke, which stands on high ground and derives its name from the fact of once having it surrounded with a copped wall. And the court of the lordship of Sheepshed met on Ivan's Head, one of the most important of the Forest Hills. It is isolated from the general range, and from one view present a bold outline, with a double summit like a saddleback. Swain's Hill, the spot where the Swanmote Court lies, at the foot of Ivar's Head, and a little distance from it stands the Hangman's Stone, which furnishes the subject of a ballad legend. 2 Coptoke figures in the local nomenclature. The age of Coft German Coffam to Pollard Behead Oak near Ulverscroft is unknown. Holyoke or Hollyoaks. May the 29th, Royal Oak Day. The children of Leicestershire make this their May Day, when they go about from home to house with sticks stuck about with flowers and streamers among any available greenery of the season. They recite this rhyme: a stig and a stag, and a very fine flag, and a maypole. When they come round begging for a bonfire on November the 5th, the formula restores the word to its usually accepted pronunciation: a stick with a stake for King James's sake, and a bonfire. Tree decay. Driving around Charnwood Forest, Leicestershire in the spring of 1893, I was told by my driver, hired from Loughborough, that the old oaks were said to have lost their tops when Lady Jane Grey, who resided at Bradgate Hall in the neighbourhood, was beheaded. A curious argument from analogy. Gartree Bush. In the lordship of Shankton, not quite 3/4 of a mile north of the town in Gartree Bush, famous for having formerly the 100 Court kept upon the spot. Stanley Wells. At the north-west corner of the wood called Stanley Wells are the remains of a tree, which within these few years, by some accident, had been destroyed, which a regular mound and trench were discernible, where it is thought the main courts for the Liberty Ulverscroft formerly to be holden. By a cruel superstition, shrew mice were formerly entombed alive in these ash trees, to afford a charm against sickness in cattle. Another custom scarcely less revolting was to pass injured children through the young stems of an ash split for that purpose. See also under Leechcraft. Maypoles. Mapplewell, the earliest name of the hamlet, Maypolewell, inclines me to think that the spot the Druids were accustomed to sell about the Beltane, and subsequently the ancient foresters to offer honours to Flora, the author of The Way to Things My Words and My Words to the Things, has some observations on the rural sacrifices that render such a superstition not an unnatural one. He says the column of the May, hence our Maypole, was the great standard of justice in the high commons of Field of May. Here it was that the people, if they saw cause, disposed or punished their governors, their barons, or their kings. The judge's bow or wand at this time discontinued or faithfully represented by a mongay, and the staff or rod of authority, the mace, as well as the term mayor, were all derived from this. The youths and maidens joined on these occasions in singing songs, of which the chorus was, "We have brought the summer home." Nossington. In the town street stands a tapered column, called a maypole, consisting of several cylindrical pieces of oak, joined once upon another with dogs and cramps of iron. Floral rents. Pertaining to the manor of Groby. A rent of the size of the forest of Charnwood of new grubbed up ground of £7 6 and 4d, a rent of hens of the said forest, 9s, £5 of pepper, £9 of cumin seed, 5 pairs of gloves, 1 ounce of silk, 1 dozen of knots of chalcedon, 6 dozen of iron arrows, and clove gilliflower worth yearly. Floral rents in Leicestershire and Rutland. Nichols tells us that in 1608, Adrian Fareham Esquire held freely certain lands and tenants in Woodhouse, called Russia Fields, and other lands there, paying yearly on Midsummer Day 1 red rose garland and a broad arrowhead, with 2 rosebuds and a suit of court at Bow Manor. At the commencement of the present century, the garland, spears, and rosebuds were regularly sent, and were always placed according to usage on the curious chair just described. Ibid. The garland of flowers now always had to be seen thereon is the representative of the ancient chief rent. It is sent in the autumn of each year in Bow Manor from Mr. Farnham, the owner of Russia Fields in the parish of Woodhouse, to the owner of Bow Manor, as I presume the lord of the manor of Woodhouse. Under that tenure the fields are held, I cannot say, for although the floral chief rent is regularly sent, the owner of the Russia Fields is never, in living recollection, attended the court of the lord of the manor. This garland, which is now said must contain 3 roses, is always hung upon the before-mentioned large chair in the hall of Bow Manor, and there it remains until replaced by the fresh garland of the succeeding year, a floral chief. Rent is by no means an uncommon acknowledgment. The manor of Streatham, Rutland, has held by the Seagraves of the Crown by the service of 1 clover, gilliflower, and a similar rent was reserved. In a grant made in this year 1274 by John de Burgh of the manor of Elmore, Gloucestershire, to Andrew de Guise, a rose, however, was the more common service. Walter de Cabron granted lands in Leighton and Newminster Abbey for the rent of 1 rose of the feast of St. James. Lionel, Earl of Ulster, granted the belfry of Cork to Geoffrey Stukeley by chenner of rose to be paid on St. John the Baptist Day. Numberless other instances might be quoted, but it will suffice to quote one more, and an example close at hand, by a deed of lease dated in 1636 and preserved in the Monument Room of the Corporation of Leicester. We learn that a piece of ground was sold in free farm to James Seal and Elizabeth his wife, who were to have the same, to be holden to our said sovereign lord of the king his heirs and successors of his honour of Leicester, to the right of his highness, Duchy of Lancaster, by filti only in free and common socage, and not in capite, yielding and paying therefore yearly into the manor of the borough of Leicester, for the same time being 1 damask rose, at or upon the feast day of St. John the Baptist, and also yielding and paying all chief rents yearly, issuing or going forth of the same. The payment of this floral rent is noticed occasionally in the Chamberlain's accounts. For instance, under date 1673-4 I find, in Lewsby Lane, item of him, John Underwood, mere for a piece of ground paying yearly at midsummer a damask rose. And in 1677-8, the heirs of widow Harlow paid the same. The rent is still receivable and is paid to the corruption by the owner of Crown Thistle Inn in Lewsby Lane, a receipt being annual given to the present esteemed proprietor, Mrs. Julia Lee, for the damask rose. It may be added that sometime the easy service of a rose was clogged with curious conditions. In one instance, in a grant made in the year 1352, it was required that a white rose be rendered before sunrise at the west end of the particular toft of St. John's Baptist Day. Floral rent. John Wemerham of Haverburgh gives grants and confirms to John Pyford of the same a curtilage situated between the tenant lately Robert Michael's on the south, and Message of the said John Piford's on the north, and abutting on, of Dag Lane in Haverborough, to have and to hold, at the yearly rent of 1 flower payable on the feast of Nativity of Saint, for all secular services. Hemp seed. Scattering hemp seed. If a young girl went around the churchyard in Midsummer Eve at midnight scattering hemp seed as the clock struck 12 and repeating these words, hemp seed, here I sow, let my true love come after me and mow. If she were here to be married, she would hear the future husband reaping behind her. A lady, 72, states that her grandmother had told her that she, the grandmother, had scattered hemp seed in the churchyard when she was a girl on Midsummer Eve, and that she would fear her lover's scythe so close to her heels that she was afraid her feet would be cut off. Buttercups. Children hold buttercups under each other's chins to see if they love butter. Milkwort has a reputation for curing snake bites. Wild teasel, also called Venue's bath. The water held in the hollows of the leaves being esteemed a cosmetic also good for disease of the eyes. Viper's bug loss. The seed resembles a serpent's head. The plant is reputed not only as an antidote to the bite, but it is also said that carried in the hand will keep vipers at a distance. Ferns. The burning of fern doth bring down rain. And that ends today's episode. Thank you very much. Please like, share and subscribe, and I shall see you next time. Goodbye.